If you're reading this, I'm already gone. If you're reading this, she won. If you're reading this, don't try it at home. Have you ever heard of the Green Lady? Well, I'm going to share my story about her, to enlighten you to the facts as I learned them. Years ago, I lived in an area of Upper East Tennessee called Dry Creek. This rural community had sprung up at the base of Buffalo Mountain and spread upwards. The further up the main road you travel, the sparser the population, till there are no houses, only mountain. The main road goes all the way across, and despite the twists and turns and slow speed, it's actually a nice drive for a lazy Sunday afternoon. Now, Dry Creek wasn't a town. It was just a small community of a couple hundred people back then. I was young and was always on the lookout for something different to do. Everyday life held no fascination, no departure from the dreary days spent at work and evenings filled with chores. To break up the mind-numbing monotony, there were Sundays filled with going to church and Wednesday evenings listening to the same sermons with slightly altered themes. I had not attended church on a regular basis since moving out of my own. And all in all, life was boring. And then, one day while I was visiting my great-aunt Janette, she told me a story. She was always telling stories, though, and I paid little attention as I cooked dinner for us. Janette was elderly, and the family thought she had gone feeble in the mind. She had asked if I ever heard of Green Lady Cove near the top of Buffalo Mountain. I had not, as I was wondering which grain would be best suited to our meal. I listened to her story with half an ear. It had started out as a tale about her youth, and I thought, yeah, that was around the same time the dinosaurs were still walking around in these parts. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, I was a smart-ass, glib 20-something back then. I had a chip on my shoulder the size of Texas, but that didn't mean I didn't love my family. I certainly did. That particular day, however, I was tired of life in general, and Aunt Janette's dusty old tale from her youth, which might or might not hold a shred of truth, simply did not interest me. I wanted to be done with dinner and get back to my own little isolated corner of the mountain and bemoan my boring existence with the help of my good friend, Jim Beam, and perhaps even a little Jack Daniels. Janette's tale seemed endless. As I was plating up the food, she said something that caught my attention, though. That's when me and some friends started exploring Wicca, witchcraft, paganism, and learning about different planes of existence and about different goddesses and gods. She took a plate and grinned at me. The wrinkles deepened at the corner of her eyes and mouth. What? Aunt Janette, you did not. I sat down to eat, scoffing at her fiction. Nodding adamantly, she continued to regale me with stories of these differing religious paths, the rules, the societies, and the magic they performed. I was floored. She knew too many details to be outright lying. I decided I would ask my pop about it next time I saw him. Her story included a warning to stay away from Green Lady Cove. I agreed, but I was intrigued. I asked what was so important about the cove. Buffalo Mountain has many coves, but I'd never known any of them to have names other than the ones the local teens had given them, like Makeout Cove, Whack-A-Weed Cove, and All the Way Cove. You can guess what went on in those coves on most weekends. Janette said that she and her friends had learned about the Green Lady, a powerful demi-goddess of the forest, and wanted to see her. It was a sort of vision quest for them. The only way to get her to appear was to go to the highest cove on the nearest mountain and repeat a childish rhyme while sitting cross-legged in a clearing. Green lady, appear for me. Manifest your form in the trees. Green lady, if you please, lend an ear and hear my needs. Green lady, walk with me. Now, hearing the childish poem recited in my aunt's tiny voice sent chills over my body. I didn't know how my sister could stand coming to Janette's house every evening and listening to her weird stories. I was happy that I only had to be there once or twice a week. I cleaned up the dinner dishes and got ready to leave. It was her bedtime, and I was needing the solace of Jim Beam even more after the story. Janette followed me to the door so that she could lock up. As I stepped to the porch, she said, "Now, Buck, don't you go getting any ideas about visiting that cove like your sister talks about doing. The Green Lady isn't what she seems." She leaned out the cracked door and whispered, "She's lethal." I agreed and left. Soon as I was home, I called my sister, Sheila, and asked her about the story. She said Janette had only told her about it a couple of days before. Sheila and a couple of her friends were already planning a trip to Green Lady Cove. She told me I could join them, if I wasn't too chicken. Now, being the older brother, I couldn't let her think I was afraid of some silly story. Besides, if I was lucky, Sheila's best friend, Bobby, would be there too. 3 years younger than me, Bobby was my idea of perfection. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever met. This could be my opportunity to finally getting around my fear of rejection and asking her out. And so, I agreed to go. The following weekend, I picked up Sheila, Tansy, and to my surprise, Bobby. We trundled along the badly rutted logging road in my Jeep all the way to where Janette had said the Green Lady Cove was situated. I saw nothing that looked like a cove. I saw only mountain and thick dark forest all around where the road ended. I turned off the Jeep and we all got out. We each marked the Jeep's location in our GPS and set off in different directions to find this elusive cove. After about 5 minutes, I grew tired of the search and began to meander in Bobby's general direction, hoping to catch a few minutes alone with her. Just as I saw Bobby ahead and began to straighten my clothes and hair in anticipation of calling out to her, my phone rang. Then, Bobby's phone rang. She turned to face me as we both answered our calls. It was Sheila calling me and Tansy calling Bobby. They had found the cove and gave us directions to get there. It was only a little way from the Jeep, in the opposite direction. Bobby walked with me, all smiles and feminine curves, distracting me from our real reason for being in the woods. When we reached the cove, it wasn't a cove at all. It was a deep, wide ravine. Trees had grown tall on the slopes, indicating that it was a very old ravine, too. We took our positions in a small clearing at the bottom of the ravine. Bobby sat next to me, her knee pressed against my thigh in the confined space of the clearing. We were completely surrounded by trees. New growth and old all mingled to form a barrier between us and everything except for a few slivers of sky. Sheila handed each of us a sheet of paper with that weird little rhyme written on it. We had to recite it simultaneously, she said. The girls apparently had it memorized. None of them glanced at their papers. Sheila started the poem, and we all joined in. They were all staring into the greenery around us, and I had to keep looking at my paper to recall the words. At the end, I asked if we were finished, and they all shushed me at the same time. Now, rolling my eyes, I pretended to scan the area for any sign of this demi-goddess. Did I think she would show up? No. Did I believe she was real? Well, absolutely not. The Green Lady was just a figment of ancient Aunt Janette's imagination. Twisted, sure, but still only a figment of her imagination. Something moved among the leaves of the oaks at the far end of the ravine. Tansy squealed and huddled closer to Sheila. Something swished through the leaves of the trees closer to us, and Bobby squealed, scooting closer to me. I wrapped an arm around her and told her I would protect her. After all, I thought it was just likely a squirrel or some other small critter just being nosy. Sheila pointed to a tall beech tree, its silvery bark glinting brightly in the sunlight. A little too brightly, considering there was very little sunlight penetrating that far toward the forest floor. And then I saw it. The arrangement of limbs and leaves resembled a woman in a dress, with her arms at her sides. The leaves that shaped her shoulder-length hair moved in the light breeze, as did her dark, shiny green leaf dress. Thinking it was an illusion of shadow and light, I tried to keep the girls calm by telling them that we hadn't asked to see the Green Lady. I told them she wasn't trying to harm us, and we shouldn't be scared. I urged Sheila to speak to her. I was still enjoying holding Bobby close and was willing to play along with their silly game, if it meant I could continue holding her for a little while longer. Sheila asked the Green Lady to move closer, if she was really there, and if she had the power to do so. And in horror, I watched as the beech tree slowly twisted until the shape of the woman faced us. Then the bottom of the tree twisted more. With the sound of splintering wood, she broke away, one foot, and then the other. The tree was free from its roots and standing on unmistakably human-looking feet. With a great sigh that sent birds scattering from trees, she moved her arms up. Human-shaped hands sprouted and brushed over her leafy hair, transforming it from leaves to green, flowering hair full of curls. A woman's face pushed up from the bark and took shape. I didn't notice that Bobby had left my side and was scrambling up the slope behind us. The tree lady raised a hand and pointed at Bobby, and then said something in a language I couldn't understand. I turned to see the undergrowth twine up and around Bobby's legs, drag her to the ground, and start spiraling around her writhing body as she screamed and fought against it. I shot to my feet and ran to her. I tore at the vines and tendrils and leaves, but they just kept coming until Bobby stopped fighting and was wrapped in a winding shroud of foliage so thick she was totally hidden. Sheila and Tansy joined me in my efforts to free Bobby, and the Green Lady moved to the bottom of the ravine and laughed. The leaves on every green plant around us shook, as if they too were laughing. Sheila turned to plead with the Green Lady to free Bobby, and the Green Lady smiled and shook her head, pointing at Tansy, and the foliage attacked her. I grabbed her by the arms and started up the remainder of the slope, pulling her free of the vines. We yelled for Sheila to run out of there with us, and we headed toward the jeep. Now I started the jeep as Tansy fumbled into the passenger seat, and before she could shut her door, a tendril shot up from the ground and wrapped around her leg up to her knee. She had time to give me one last horror-filled look and reached for me before it yanked her ruthlessly out of the vehicle, taking the door with them. She was covered and motionless before I could even get my door open. I blew the horn, trying to hurry Sheila. Rolling down the window, I yelled her name over and over until my throat was sore. Sheila appeared at the top of the ravine and started running for the jeep. I laughed triumphantly. She had made it, and I urged her to run faster as I could see the foliage coming to life right at her heels. The Green Lady appeared over the top of the ravine, and in 3 long strides, she was right behind Sheila. I threw the jeep into gear and tried to hit her, but she had grabbed Sheila and disappeared into the thickness of the forest before I could. Now, with all of them dead, I drove off Buffalo Mountain and straight to Aunt Janette's house. I burst through her front door, crying, angry, and just demanding that she explain all of this to me. Laughing, she motioned me toward the guest bedroom. "She's fine, silly buck." She pointed to the bed, and there was Sheila, sleeping soundly, covered to her chin with a handmade quilt. No, I didn't imagine this. And I turned from the bedroom in confusion. "Oh no, dear. Those other girls are quite dead, and I'm afraid you were the last one besides poor Sheila to see them alive." Janette clucked her tongue and shook her head. "What?" I asked as sirens pierced the evening air. "They're coming for you, Buck," she said, smiling sweetly. Sheila knew the truth, and I went in to wake her. I didn't know how all of this was possible, but I wanted her awake to defend me. I shook her and her eyelids fluttered, then closed again. I yanked the cover off of her. Her skin had big white splotches surrounded by silvery patches. Janette chuckled. "Oh, isn't it marvelous that she was chosen to carry on my work? The work of the Green Lady?" The first police car slid to a stop in the gravel driveway. I backed away from Janette. She covered Sheila again quickly, and in a low voice she said, "You better go with them now, boy. It's safer for you in the mental asylum than all the way out here in the mountains." "Why? I don't understand." My mind felt as if it were fracturing under the stress. "Well, the Green Lady will be after you, that's why. Only the chosen one is supposed to get away. The rest of you were sacrifices." She grinned and pulled up her long sleeves to show me the white splotches surrounded by gray patches. She winked at me. The officer banged on the front door. "I have to go answer that since I'm the one who called them. Go with them, or I will have to give you to the Green Lady. You understand it's nothing personal, but not everyone can be chosen by a goddess. You should have stayed away from that cove like I told you. You weren't supposed to be there, but you were, and now things are different." She disappeared to answer the door, and I stood motionless as the first cop and then his backup units filed into the room. I went quietly with him, and I tried to tell the cops, the judge, my court-appointed psychiatrist, and anyone else who would listen about what really happened. No one listened. They judged me mentally deficient and put me in Daisy Cove Psychiatric Hospital for the criminally insane. The funny thing is, I see her from my room. The Green Lady. She walks around the edge of the hospital's property, watching me. Next week, my doctor says I must begin taking part in their new rehabilitation program. I don't want to, but there's no way out of it. Next week, I have to accompany 2 other inmates, 2 orderlies, an armed guard, and a nurse on a short nature walk. The doctor says it has been proven to speed healing of fractured minds, to commune with nature.